All right, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us here on this Monday night. I'm Chris Bianchi here with Rapids President Pádraig Smith, and thanks for joining us on the live stream. Really excited to do this. This is our debut fan forum here for the Rapids. This is a really exciting event and kind of a degree of behind the scenes and a lot of your questions. And I know there's a lot of you who have those questions. If you do have a question, I assure you we'll get to it. We're going to start off with a lot of questions that have already been submitted, and then we're going to get into... Ooh, there we go. That's been fixed. So once we get through those questions that have been submitted, we'll get into some viewer questions. I'll ask you to raise your hand. So we'll get into that nitty-gritty mumbo-jumbo. But let's kind of start things off with a bit of introduction. I'm Chris Bianchi. You probably know me more from you yelling at me on Twitter about the weather forecast. Here I'm serving in a slightly different capacity. You'll be, again, using me for some of those questions. Of course, a lot of you might know I'm a diehard soccer fan. My parents are from Chile. I was just venting to Pádraig here about my Chileans not making the World Cup, and Pádraig was venting to me about the Irish not making the World Cup next year either, so we do have something in common there. But on a more serious note, of course, we're here to answer your questions about everything. And of course, we're going to focus on the summer transfer window, which of course just finished up here, and of course the big announcement about Paxton Aaronson joining the Rapids as well. Yeah, I think that's a round of applause. Pádraig was explaining to me that he had about 2 sleepless nights. We'll get into the behind the scenes of the Paxton Aaronson signing as well here. But we're going to start things off with a summary of the transfer window, then shift to some of your submitted questions. And we know there's also a lot of off-the-field questions as well about the stadium and other things like that. We'll get to that coming up here. And again, we're going to get those follow-ups as well. So if you do have a follow-up question, raise your hand and we'll try and get to that and as well. So kind of want to start things off. Oh, by the way, we have another Rapids second fan forum this offseason with Rapids new CBO, Haley Dermer, who's here tonight, and KSC President of Team and Media Operations, Kevin Demoff. So that's going to be coming up this offseason. So we're going to be hosting more of these moving forward. This is the first of many, I would imagine, here as well. But we're starting off with Pádraig. So with that said, we're going to start off with the first question. We're going to get into plenty of the offseason transfer window. But the first question comes from Lucas Hoffman here, Pádraig. And what are you doing to improve the fan experience during home games? What is the long-term strategy for the club? And how can we ensure that the club is looking out for the best interest of the team and not just the bottom line? That comes from, again, Lucas Hoffman.
Great, thank you. Well, first and foremost, thank you to everybody for coming out tonight. It's great to see so many friendly faces and so many new faces here. This is, as you said, Chris, this is something we want to do more often, to be perfectly honest with you. I think it's really important that we're out here, we're meeting with our supporters, meeting with the fans, and talking about this kind of stuff. You know, there's some things that obviously do stay behind the scenes, but there are some things that we can bring out into the open and that we can talk about and that we can have really in-depth conversations about, and hopefully, you know, pull the curtain back a little bit and let folks see in behind it. I think the first question actually ties in with what you spoke about in terms of the fan forum that's to come. Like, we know, we're acutely aware of the fact that we're all better, us as a club, our team, when we've got that raucous crowd behind us. You know, when Dick's Sporting Goods Park is absolutely rocking, we've got that. Yeah, when C38 are going, there's no two ways about it. You know, when they're flying, when teams come in, they feel that atmosphere, they feel the altitude, it really does impact them. So we know how important it is to have a strong supporter base there and to have that culture. And we know that right now it's not at the level that we want it to be. So when we talk about the fan experience, it's incredibly important to us that we get that right. And we don't think we've got it right yet. We know we haven't. And we know that there's a lot that our supporters are looking for, and there's a lot that we have to deliver on. And I think it's one of the reasons why we brought Haley in today, and I'm sure she's going to be more than happy to say hello to everybody. But she's been here, this is her 7th week now, so she's still, you know, getting her feet wet and kind of getting to grips with everything. Kevin's been here a little bit longer, obviously. He's been here for a little bit over a year at this point in time as the president of all teams and media for KSE. So what we felt was the best thing to do was to have this fan forum focus on the football side of things and the window that's just gone by. But we do want to have a broader discussion with our supporters on that fan culture and on that fan experience and on what we're doing both from a short, medium and long-term perspective with the club. So we're going to have that in the off season, and Kevin and Haley are going to join me, and we're going to talk about everything basically. Absolutely everything is going to be on the table for us to go through and discuss. So I think that's going to be a really important part of that, and a good way of kind of highlighting what's to come. We're going to keep doing the things we can do now in the short term, obviously, as we end the season. Things like the jersey swap, like something that I think was really, really simple. Like when you move out of DP10 and you bring in a new DP10, you want to make sure that fans have got the opportunity to put his number on their back of their shirt. So I think that was a really good initiative. But there's a lot more to come in that area, but we want to give it a full night, to really focus on that. So we'll do that early in the off season.
We're going to take some questions on the fan experience side of things here in just a second. I kind of want to offer my own question for you here. How much fan input are you going to have in that process? I would imagine there'll be a fair bit. And how will that work? Is it going to be events like this? How will you take that into account?
A lot is the answer. I think, again, when Haley was coming on board, one of the things that really stood out to both Kevin and I was her commitment to that fan experience. It was really the first and at times the only thing she wanted to talk about was making sure that we had a fan experience that was best in class and something that our supporters wanted to come back to over and over again. And I think to do that, you have to listen. Mm-hmm. There's no other way to go about that. If you don't listen to what your supporters are telling you, then you're not going to get it right. No matter how many good ideas you think you have, you're not going to do the best job you could possibly do. So that's what you're going to see a lot of now over the coming weeks and months, is a lot of fan surveys, a lot of going out there into the market and basically understanding exactly what it is that our supporters and our market want. And then it's up to us to deliver on that. And that will be seen. That will be seen. The proof will be in the pudding from that perspective. But, we know there's a commitment there. It's something Kevin talks to us about consistently. I know how important it is to Josh as well that we get this right. And that ultimately we marry the two, right? We want to be very competitive on the field, but we want to provide an incredible experience for our supporters off the field. And as I said, we're aware. We know what's going on, and we do listen. We know it's not to the level that we would want it to be right now, and we're assuring people that we're going to get there with it.
And with that said, any questions specifically about fan experience, kind of any follow-up questions? And raise your hand if you do have a question for Pádraig specifically about that. Yeah, right here.
Hey, Pádraig. Hey, Chris. So, one of the bigger social media and discussion posts that happens frequently in the last few years is about the video board. There have been numerous Instagram posts. There's an Instagram site that's mocking the video board. What are we doing about it?
No, I think, look, that's a long conversation that I really do want Kevin and Haley to be a part of as well, because I think they'll be able to get into it in a different level of depth than I will. We're aware, Eric, is what I would say. We're very well aware of the fact that that's not a video board that we're thrilled with, and that is something that's very, very high up on the list of things that we need to address. So we're well aware of it, and I think we can get into more depth on that in terms of exactly what the plan is with it when we do sit with Kevin and Haley as well and go through that in the off-season. But, yeah, acknowledged and understood.
Another question here.
Hello. Oh, that's weird hearing my voice. The scoreboard. I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
So,
I'll talk later.
Yeah. Scoreboard's been acknowledged. Any other questions relating to fan experience? And again, I think what we're gathering here is an overall. Oh, here we go. Yeah, question from this gentleman here in the front.
Hello. So I had a question. So I know a lot of other clubs in the league have vertical tifos and things like that to show the support from the supporter group. Is there any plans for the stadium with that to help the supporter group a little bit more to get more visual displays?
Yeah, I think this is all part of the communication and the work that we have to do to really dive into what is needed and what our groups want to have, I would say, out there. So it's very much a part of it. I think C38 and our supporters groups do an incredible job with their tifos. They're thoughtful, they're funny, they're engaging, and I think that's a really, really cool thing. We want to make sure that we're able to provide the equipment that's needed to really execute that at the highest level. So again, as we get out there and we're talking to the various different groups, we'll make sure that feedback is taken into account when we look at what we're going to do.
Any other questions relating to fan experience? just please raise your hand so I can see. I've been eating my carrots. I just want to make sure I can see them. And going once, going twice. All right. Now moving our attention to on the field. Obviously, a busy summer transfer window that just concluded. We just talked about some of the big acquisitions, specifically Paxton Aronson. That said, we're putting you a little bit in the hot seat here with this question. This one comes from Kristen Murphy. She says, why does it feel like the Rapids are a tunnel for players to come into the club and become amazing, then we sell them off for big money, and then start the whole process over? That question there from Kristen. Anyways, a fairly direct question there.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And to be honest with you, I'm going to take the positive side of that, to be honest, because I think what it does show is our ability to develop players. And I think that's an incredibly important part of the soccer industry in general. I don't think teams can survive if they're just going after finished products. Like that's not a strategic way of building a roster, in particular in a salary capped environment. It's a real challenge. You have to be able to go out and identify players that either haven't reached their peak yet or are a little bit under the radar, because in a salary cap environment you need to get efficiency from those. You need to get good efficient returns from those players. So I think there's a lot of pride in our group when you look at some of the players that we brought through. The homegrown players obviously stand out for us. The Cole Bassett's, the Sam Vines, those players who've come through our group from very early ages, gone on into Europe, and then as we've shown and as we've always said to our players, like there'll always be a return here, like there'll always be a pathway back. But it also extends to the draft, the likes of Moise Bombito, who obviously is now playing in France for Nice, and they've unfortunately been knocked out of the Champions League, but they'll be in Europa League this year. You see what he's done on the national level as well, and I think it's, I don't want to say guaranteed, nothing's guaranteed, but there's a strong possibility that he's going to be starting in the World Cup next year for Canada. It extends to trades. Boston Trusty we bring in when things aren't going well for him at Philadelphia, develop him. He gets to a point where he's able to contribute to an incredible season for us in 2021, and then he makes the move to Arsenal and Birmingham and Sheffield United, plays in the Premier League, and then goes into Celtic, and has an incredible career in Europe. And now lately someone coming back from Europe, and Georgi Mihailovic, who again comes back at maybe a low point in his career, 18 months with us, gets back into the national team, goes to the Olympics, has a really good level of performance for us, and then we make the move with him. So I think it's a really interesting component of the industry in general, because I think unlike the United States and the other sports here in the United States, soccer is a global sport. And while MLS has developed incredibly and grown incredibly over the last number of years, it's still not the peak of soccer from a club perspective. That still resides in the top leagues in Europe. And it's something we're catching. We are catching them, but it'll take time. And I think if you look at the global soccer market, there are maybe only a small handful of clubs who aren't selling clubs. There are very few clubs that can say, no, we're going to turn down any offer for our player. It's just not the realistic or the real life kind of way that this works out. So what's important for us is that we've constantly got depth charts of targets that we can go after, and that it becomes a virtuous circle. And you have this development circle where you're able to identify, recruit, develop, win with those players, and then they move on, and you just go again and you reinvest, and that reinvestment then allows you to go deeper, preferably into the academy space, which is really important to us to make sure that we're dominating that nationally. And you saw what our U18s did this year in the national championships, going to the final, and you see some of the young players that we've got coming through, and there's more to come. There'll be more signings that I think people will become aware of as we get into the winter months. So it's something that we're always looking to balance. We want to be a team that develops the top players, and that at this moment in time, those players then go on to the next level. That's really important for us to showcase what we're good at and to attract the next wave of talent. The key thing is to make sure you're competitive while you've got those players, and to build a structure and a process and a system that allows you to remain competitive as those players are cycling out.
And perhaps following up to that, does it perhaps get easier in time if you're, say, you have a success story in a Mihailovic, you have a success story in a Bombito, and then you go to Paxton Aronson and say, look at what we've done with them, and is there a domino effect component to that?
Yeah, I mean, we see it with the Paxton. I mean, Paxton came to us. That is something I'm sure we'll get into it later on, but I think it tells its own story that when players are, players of that caliber are thinking to themselves, maybe MLS is the right destination for me. We want the Rapids to be the first team that they think about, because we want to have this domestic core of young players who are supremely talented. And I mean, Paxton's just an outstanding player in person, but we want them to think about us first. And I think this can only happen when you've got a strong core as well. You need to make sure you've got good, experienced players around the building, the likes of the Maxus. We've been able to bring in a Rob Holding now, who's going to be a terrific addition to the group. And over the past number of years, we've always had these good, what I would call program players. These guys who are just going to go out there, top professionals. They're going to show these young players what it takes to reach their maximum level and to reach their maximum potential. And I think then you create this structure that really works with both and allows the competitiveness. And that's something that we're striving for all the time. So I don't look at it as a negative that we're bringing in players and that they perform and then move on. I would look at it as a negative if they're not moving on to a higher level. And that's, I think, where a little bit of the Georgie thing kind of took me a little bit by surprise. You're talking about a team in Toronto that hasn't been in the playoffs for the last 5 years, or about to become 6, versus a team that's on pace right now to be in the playoffs 4 times in the last 6 years. So that was disappointing for me, but I think, the one thing that you want to do then is get better, and we got better.
Any follow-ups to that? Right here.
All right, I got to be careful. I have a loud voice anyway, so a microphone can be a little dangerous. First of all, Pádraig, congrats to you, Fran, the scouting team, for such from a fan perspective, supporter perspective, a really quick pivot on the Georgie news to the Paxton news. I know that didn't happen overnight. I know the team's constantly, as you said, they've got a full sheet. No matter who's on the roster, there's somebody in mind just in case. I think from a perspective, the concern that a lot of the fan base has that I've heard is when we do sell a player like a Bombito for a record sale, and mind you, the Paxton news probably answers this question, but I think people might want to hear you say it. When we bring in these record sums, the concern is, especially cash, not TAM or GAM, because the Cronkies can't do anything with that, is how much. The concern is the redeployment of those funds directly into the club, and how much of it might go back to the parent company, and being able to free those up and do your work that you need to do. How much support are you getting from Kevin on that? And could you just talk through that process and the reality of, okay, we sell a player for 8, do we get the full 8?
Yeah, no, it's easy to talk through, because I think it happens from before you sell the player, actually. Like, it happens from the offer stage. And it was fantastic from my perspective to get these offers. You get these offers in, it shows you're doing something right. You buy a player for 3.6, 3.7 million, and all of a sudden someone's offering you 6 million. You're like, okay, that's good, but it's not good enough. And then, I was in LA with Kevin and with Josh and said, look, we've got this offer. And they're like, yeah, we don't need to take that. We don't. Then they offered 7, and we still didn't need to take it. And we're under no pressure to sell those players just to get a financial return. When Georgie then came in and said, hey, I want to leave for Toronto, it changes the calculus a little bit. And then, as I said, I spent about a week trying to convince him to stay. And at that point, I felt his mind was made up. He wanted to go to Toronto. He wanted to do what he wanted to do. So my role changes then a little bit. It changes from trying to convince him to stay to 2 things: getting the best deal I can possibly get for the club, and then making sure that we're in a position to go and bring in a replacement. And I think the interesting thing is that you really have to delve into the depths of the transfer system and how it works. And I don't know if people truly know how it works. That money doesn't all just arrive the next day. There's other clubs that have to be paid. There's percentages that go here, there, and everywhere. Then you've got GAM conversion. You've got a whole host of things that go on behind the scenes. But at a very basic level, when we brought this money in for Georgie, that money doesn't all come in immediately. It doesn't. It comes in over 3 years. We went and looked. We had a couple of targets inside the league that we went after quite aggressively and very quickly. Paxton was someone we've obviously followed for a long time and knew a lot about. He approached us via his agent, and we were immediately like, yes, this is obviously someone we're going to be very interested in. We then were told the numbers, and we were like, okay, that's a lot of money. It's significantly more than Georgie from an overall package. So that did require a question, or a conversation, I should say, with ownership. And again, it was just a very quick, yes, if that's what you think is the right thing to do, let's go and do it. And as I said, it's significantly more. When you start to look at transfer fees, salary, marketing rights, all of these things, the package is many, many millions more than the Georgie package. But we got approval for that so quickly, and that's what ultimately enabled us to get it across the line. And I think this is what it's about. It's about putting in place the plan and the strategy and starting to show proof of concept. Because at the end of the day, if you go out there and you look around this league where there's a lot of players brought in for big money that aren't successful. And again, I think a lot of people talk to us about why do we loan in so many players. And that's a big reason why. We don't want to bring in players that we don't think are going to be long-term fits for the club, that we're not certain are going to be long-term fits for the club. We want to see how they adapt. We want to see how they get on within the culture of our environment, because it's the most important thing for us. But when we identify someone like Paxton, we're able to then pivot very quickly and say, no, this is the guy. This is the guy we think we want to bring in. And ownership were incredibly quick to turn around and say, yes, if that's what you think is right, let's go for it. And again, you do your due diligence. You want to try and de-risk these things as much as you can, because you're investing a lot of money. We felt like we did that. We felt confident around the player, the person, the family, so much more that goes into this. And ultimately, thrilled that we got to reinvest every single dollar and then some into this deal.
Talked a little bit off camera beforehand about that process. How did that work, and what did it take to get it across the finish line?
Yeah, so yes, we are off. We good? Excellent, thank you. The Paxton deal was a fantastic deal to be involved in. To be perfectly honest with you, it's for so often our dealings are with European or with MLS clubs. There's a lot of trades and the GAM and things like this, like assets, but with something like this, you're dealing with a big club. They've sold a player to Liverpool for 85 million. They've got a lot going on in the window. Goalkeepers coming and going. Incredible to deal with, though. Frankfurt were top class throughout. But the way it unfolded, ultimately, I was chatting to Paxton's agent about somebody else, about a different player. He brought up the idea of Paxton, and immediately I was like, yes, look, this is big-time player. We know a lot about him. This is somebody we really want to go after. So I asked the agent to give me 24 hours to just do a first delve and have a look, and to send me the numbers. That was basically the way it kicks off. First thing we do is we look at our data. I can happily say we have never signed a player with a better analytics sheet than Paxton. His numbers just jump off the page from our model. So we knew right away we had somebody that really possessed all of the skills that we wanted in a player. We knew his athletic quality, his athleticism was going to be at a very, very high level within MLS, so really someone that we wanted. Get the scouts on it immediately. So these scouts are going to go on, they're going to go and watch a number of games, they're going to cut down clips so that the coaching staff can ultimately see it, and that myself and Frank can see it as well. So they get on with that. In the background, then you start the due diligence work. So I'm sure everybody knows Jamie Franks, Coach Franks with DU. So Jamie does an incredible job with DU. They kicked off the other night their season. Jamie's from the same town as the Aronsons in New Jersey. He's from Medford. So I rang Jamie to kind of have a quick chat with him about the family, about what he knew about them growing up, what his thoughts were and impression. Again, just glowing reference. And that became a common theme throughout all our conversations with people that know the Aronsons. Conversations happened then pretty quickly with Chris as well, because he obviously coached his brother Brendan at Leeds, so he already knew the family a little bit, knew what the players were like. We're chatting to a few old former coaches, people that have been around them, and just getting a real handle on it. The numbers then come back to you, and you kind of say like, okay, we're a little bit out here. This is a bit more than we've got. That requires a quick conversation with ownership, and as I said earlier, it was great because it was a quick conversation. They were like, yes, if you think this is the guy, then let's go and do that. And then you start to really ramp things up. So you meet with the player. That's a really big part of this. We brought in a new director of scouting, Alex Aldridge, in the off season. Alex has done a terrific job. So he jumps in and immediately prepares a presentation that's done with Coach Armas. Coach prepares a video clip in terms of how he wants the player to play, and that all gets brought together. And then we sat with the player. We sat with the player and his dad and his agent for almost 2 hours, I would say, just going through everything, challenging him, telling him about our plan, what we wanted to do, and talking about ultimately how we felt he could fit perfectly in to our game model, to our club, and to our ambitions for what we wanted to achieve over the next couple of years. And you could see it immediately. One of the things that really impressed me about Paxton was his maturity. You know, this is a kid who's actually turns 22 today. Is it today the 26th? Tomorrow. Turns 26, or he turns 22 tomorrow. So, you know, such a young man, and yet the experiences he has already are quite remarkable. You know, he's already won a Supporters' Shield with Philadelphia in his teenage years. Then he gets a big move over to Europe. Then he goes out on loan. He does extraordinarily well. You know, I mean, if you look at, you know, Georgie did well in the Netherlands, but Paxton outperformed that by some distance. Then he's back in. He played, I think, the second highest or the third highest minutes in the preseason with Frankfurt. But then he sees Mario Götze doesn't retire or doesn't move on, so he's there, and it's a German legend, obviously, who's won the World Cup. And he starts to think to himself, okay, maybe I'm going to take a different path. And to have that kind of maturity at 21, 22 is incredible, really remarkable. And he came across as exactly that. So we left the call feeling very confident. We felt like it was a good fit. We felt like he would fit very well with us. We were quietly confident, but we knew we were dealing with some big clubs, right? You're talking about Red Bull Salzburg. Frank Lampard's on the phone with him from Coventry. Southampton are looking at him. Midtjylland are looking at him. There's a lot of really good teams that are looking at him. So there's a little bit of keeping your fingers crossed, and you're checking in with the agent, you're sending texts to the players and to his dad, and you're trying to do anything you can to convince him that you're the right destination. And then thankfully he came back early last week and said, okay, I want it to be the Rapids. That's what I want to do. And then you just go into overdrive because you're trying to negotiate then with Frankfurt. They're obviously trying to get the best deal they can. There's other teams involved that are trying to outbid you ultimately. So it just becomes a negotiation. And then, yeah, as I said to you off air, I guess, beforehand, like the last 48 hours were really crazy because you've got so much paperwork to do. You've got to fly him across, obviously. He's got to get the medical done. You've got to get the ITC through. There's a whole host of things that go on behind the scenes. But thankfully, I think at about 2 or 3 o'clock on deadline day, we got the official confirmation that he was through, and one of our players, and finished his medical and trained the next morning on the field 2 days later. So, yeah, really pleased.
Most importantly, what was the celebration once it was all signed, sealed? Did you do anything special? Anything beyond a fist pump?
I'll be honest with you, I hadn't slept in 2 days. I left the office, went and got some sushi and had a beer.
Nothing like raw fish to celebrate that. We'll want to move on. We'll get into a few more on-the-field questions. So if you do have some on-the-field questions or follow-ups for what Pádraig just talked about, we'll get to those as well. But I kind of want to move on to this question because I think it's pretty important, and it relates to what we're just talking about here. This comes from Mario Portillo, who asks, what is the club strategy now that the best player of the team has had in a long while decided he didn't want to be a part of the club, obviously in reference there to Mihailovic. I would imagine this question may have been sent in a little while ago, but I think it's worth addressing here. This is from Mario. What's the club strategy now?
Go and get a better player who wants to be here.
Simple as that. I don't think we need follow-ups on that one based on the round of applause. So, with two DPs on the roster now, and Kevin Cabral soon to be off the books, will you be looking to add a third designated player in the winter window? And if so, what do you see as the biggest need to bolster the roster?
No, we won't be. We're pretty excited, as I think you'll see a number of teams are, about the change in MLS rules that allow for 2 DPs, 4 U22s, and then allows you to buy $2 million in GAM. I think it's one of the things that's really hard. We would probably need a whole fan forum, big charts here, like everything, whiteboards that we could go through what GAM is and how you can best make use of it. But it's essentially like this incredibly valuable roster building mechanism that gives you so much more flexibility in terms of how you go build a team. We're big believers that the team is best built when there's depth across the field and that you've got good balance within the roster rather than concentrating your resources in a smaller number of players. So I think the opportunity to adopt that 2-4-2 model is something that we're very keen on. Obviously, that rule came into place after we had acquired our DPs, so we weren't able to adjust to it this year. But that is the model we will take up next year. I think it's going to give us more flexibility. It's going to give us a deeper roster, a more balanced roster. And I think, look, there's a number of areas that we feel like we might need to address, that we're thinking about, that our scouts are looking at right now. But at the end of the day, a lot of the focus right now is on 6 more league games and then a long playoff run. That's what we're looking for. We know we've got a good group. We're thrilled with the players we've been able to bring in this window. And if you look at it, you know, we lost Awazium and Georgie, but we brought in Paxton, Rob Holding, Noah Cobb, Rafael Santos, and Manyoma as well. So we brought a lot of players into this group that are going to really add greatly to the overall depth, competition level, and quality of the team. So our focus right now is on making sure we finish the season strong. You know, Josh is out for a little bit. Connor Ronan's getting closer to fitness, as is Wayne Frederick. We need to get these guys back so that we've got a little bit more firepower there for the closing stages. But from my perspective, the great thing is that it's in our hands. You know, we've got 6 games to go. If we take care of business, then we're going to be in the playoffs, and then the plan is go and win some games of consequence and bring a trophy back, which is where we're short. You know, it's not what we've done. So very proud of what the guys have done. You know, 3 playoff appearances in 5 years, 2 Champions League appearances in 5 years. There's only 6 other clubs in MLS who've actually had that kind of sustained success over the last 5 years. But it's winning those big games. It's winning in those moments in the playoffs, winning games of consequence as we talk about them. That's the next step for us. So that's the focus right now, and then we'll adapt them. You know, our guys are working on it behind the scenes, but we'll have a good off season as well, no doubt.
Should mention that question came from Mark Weatherly about that. Any follow-ups about the DP strategy and perhaps looking ahead to the winter window? And please raise your hand if you do have a question on that so I can see, and Pádraig and I can mark it out. Going once, going twice. I think we're good there. So, want to move on to a question. This comes from Brian Cox, who asks about, with an updated roster and even with a strong playoff performance, what assurances do we have that our best players won't be sold after and we fall back to the bottom? So kind of following up on the earlier question about, you know, selling players, how do you keep those players in the fold even after perhaps some success?
Yeah, look, I think this is part of the league's development. As the league continues to grow and we have better players, those players are going to attract interest from other teams, from big teams from abroad. And I think you're going to naturally see teams sell off players. Like, it's part and parcel of this industry. I look at LAFC. If you look at someone like Bogusz, not someone I'm particularly fond of, but an incredibly talented player. He's done incredibly well against us, unfortunately. But when the offer came in for Cruz Azul, $9 million, they took that offer. You know, and that's part and parcel of the business that we're in. I think the way you go about keeping players is by performing and having a good group that players want to be a part of. And we saw that. I sat down with Rafa Navarro a couple of days ago, and again, that guy's mentality blows me away. Like, what an incredible player. I think the work rate that he produces game in and game out for a centre forward is nothing short of remarkable. And it's pretty uncommon in this modern age of soccer to see a player work as hard as he does. And he's always brutally disappointed when he doesn't score, but he gives everything for the team every single time. And we turned down a lot of offers for him in this window, and I wanted to sit with him and address that and help him understand why and what we were thinking. But part of that conversation is still about his ambitions and his goals as a young man. And he talked to us about, you know, Fluminense being 2 hours from his home city and how, like, he understood why we turned it down, and that was okay because he was happy here. Like, but he also would love the idea of one day playing for his hometown club, you know. And this is a club in Fluminense who've just reached the Club World Cup semi-final. You know, that's a big, high level. But I really loved his reaction because it was like, no, I like it here. I really love it. I want to be here. But he is going to have aspirations for other things. It doesn't mean he will leave, but it does mean he may leave at some point in time. And that's okay. That's part and parcel of this industry and part and parcel of the game. You see it all over the globe. You know, you see this in every single transfer window. What I love is that we've got a strong cohort of American players who want to be here. And I think that was one of the things that Paxton talked to us about. One of the reasons why he wanted to come to Colorado was because he looked at the Zach Steffens and the Reggie Cannons and the Cole Bassetts, and he saw this American core that we've got, and he wanted to be a part of that. And I think that's a really good thing. So I look at this as being something that we have to continue to plan for, that we have to understand how we are going to strategize for this, how we are going to build teams, and then change teams. You know, and that's a normal part and parcel of this. Like, and that's the key thing for us. We talk about it a lot. What happened to us after 2021? A lot of those guys, the Jack Prices, Danny Wilsons, Keegan was a part of that, obviously, turning 28, 29. And at that point in time, we decided, you know what, we want to give them another chance. We want to go again with that group. And unfortunately, the injury bug hit Pricey and Diego, and we weren't able to maintain that. But that was a learning moment for us, because it's very difficult to expect a bunch of 30-year-olds who had been there for kind of 4 years together to keep going into another cycle. So you'll hear me talk about cycles all the time, and it's a really important part of our planning and our strategy in terms of how we maintain a level of competitiveness. Are we there yet? No, we're not. You know, we've got to get better at this, and we've got to make sure that we've got the right balance in the team. But again, I look at this group, they're all contracted through 27, in Paxton's case a lot longer, but we've got the core of the group together, and we've got, you know, I think Dave mentioned it earlier, we've got these players that we've got lined up if someone does move on. But I see it as being a really positive point as to where MLS currently sits in the global ecosystem, to the improvements in the league, to the standards in the league, and to the perception of the league globally. And I think it's something to be encouraged, to be honest with you.
What's interesting to your answer there, Pádraig, is I kind of hear two different paths to happiness for a good player. One from Rafa, where it seems like on-field success and importance plays a role, and then Paxton, I'm sure that obviously matters to him, but it's also a cultural fit, right? The American player, the domestic development that you're talking about. Is there a bit of a kind of almost positioning things a little bit differently for different players in that realm?
Oh yeah, 100%. You have to position things different for different people. You know, these guys are all individuals. They all have their own aspirations and dreams and potentials. And I think one of the things that we do quite well, and I'll give a huge credit to our staff who do an incredible job of this, is helping to create a culture that is welcoming. And one of the lines that we have in our presentation is that your dreams are our dreams. Like, for us to really go out there and attract the best players, we need to be able to show them that we can provide them a pathway to achieve their goals in life. And that's a key part of it. And we talk about team first. Coach talks about team first all the time. He has the players sign a flag that travels with the team to every game. And it's almost like a contract. It's something that they're signing up to, that they're going to put the team first. But it doesn't mean they abandon their ambitions or forget about their ambitions as an individual player. And it's up to us to create that culture where they know that they can reach their potential and their ambitions by being part of a team, and by being part of a team that ultimately achieves more than they could achieve individually. So I think that's it's a big part of it.
Interesting. Any follow-ups to what you just heard there from Pádraig about? Right over here. Never mind. Thank you.
Thanks for taking my question. Pádraig, to piggyback on what you just mentioned with Coach and his development of the culture, and to be able to achieve the dreams of the players here and you know, going forward, what's the current status with Armas's
Contract.
being able to stay or not stay, like the extension part of it?
Yeah.
Question about Chris Armas here.
Yeah, so we're in negotiations right now. Like, so I'm dealing with his agent right now, trying to hammer that out. But we obviously want Coach to stay. He's done a terrific job since he's been here. I spoke at Paxton's press conference. You talked about culture. I've talked about culture. For me, it is the single most important thing in what we do. You know, we deliberately go out looking for players of a particular character and with a particular mentality. But obviously that's pointless if you don't have the right coaches in place and if you don't have the right guys. Now, we knew when we brought Coach Armas in, and again, I'll give huge credit to our staff here, we had 18 different people involved in that hiring process. And the one thing we kept going back to was energy and positivity. We needed somebody who was going to bring an energy every day. We knew we found that in Coach. I don't think we quite knew exactly where his energy was. It proved to be even higher than we thought. But yeah, you can see that. His energy is infectious. It really is, and I think it's something that we're really pleased with, to be honest with you, when you see that. The positivity is also something that's really important, because I don't know if people know this, but you're going to win games and lose games in soccer. I don't know if that's always seen, but how you maintain that over the course of what is a very long season. We don't play as many games as our I know it's your cousins in the Nuggets and Avs, but it's a longer season. It's a really long season. And I think maintaining that kind of positive attitude and keeping everyone upbeat, that's difficult. That's a challenge. So Coach Armas has done a wonderful job with that. And yeah, his agent's a tough guy, but we're having some good positive conversations, I would say.
So my question ties into how you look at players and bringing them in from a recruitment perspective, but it really ties into the multi-club setup that we currently have. Obviously, Rob Holding is the first player that I've seen come the other direction in 10 or 15 years of Kroenke ownership. What is the strategy when we compare that to, say, organizations like the City Group or even Red Bull?
That's a great question, and it's also one of my favorite topics. So again, I could spend quite a lot of time talking about this. I don't think anyone's cracked the code on MCO yet. So the multi-club ownership structure is a really, really difficult one to get right. There's a number of different reasons for that. Sometimes it's as simple as the fact that the seasons don't overlap in the right way. And that's always been a challenge for us, because players that either came on loan with the possibility of making it permanent would be arriving either halfway through the year or leaving halfway through the year. And that really didn't work at that point in time. It was a real challenge. And sometimes it's more complicated than that, where players, in particular the young players over there, still felt that they wanted to stay in Europe at that point in time. Like, that was something that as I first joined the club back in 15, Isaac Hayden's a great example. I don't know if you remember Isaac, but terrific player. I met him in Arsenal's training ground. We sat down, we talked about it. He was really intrigued by it. He kind of knew himself he wasn't going to break through at Arsenal. He wasn't going to make the grade there, but he still felt he could play Premier League football. And he backed himself to do that and decided to stay rather than coming here. And he was proven correct in that, ultimately. You know, he played with Hull and he played with Newcastle, and he had a really, really good career. I look at different clubs around the globe, and I think there's certain things they do well, different multi-club groups, I should say. Certain clubs do really well from a branding perspective. Other clubs do well from, you know, a player integration perspective. You look at Red Bull Salzburg and Leipzig, and you see a lot of movement, less so though maybe with Red Bull New York from a player movement perspective. One of the things that I love about what we do is we're actually bigger than a multi-club organization. We're a multi-sport organization. And that's something that I think is probably not seen as much, but actually maybe adds even more value behind the scenes. And I'll give you an example of that. Just about 3 or 4 weeks ago, maybe about a month ago, I went to LA with some colleagues for a couple of days, and we had a summit that Kevin Demoff put on, and Josh Kroenke was there as well, where we had members from the Nuggets, the Avs, the Rams, and ourselves, all sitting together for 2 days, going through the different things that impact us in our business and talking about how we could maybe learn from each other. And we covered everything from the draft to performance, so healthcare, medical, how we look at bringing through players, development. We were able to pick each other's brains on all these things and see what worked in a different sport, why it worked, why it maybe doesn't work. Are there best practice approaches to certain things that, you know, maybe we don't necessarily know about right now, but someone at the Rams does or someone at the Nuggets does. We were able to talk about the difference in our sport where, you know, we're looking at signing players that are 14 years of age, whereas in the NFL, the NBA, and the NHL, they get the benefit of seeing them go through college, where you have all of the best players, young players in the world, go through this one beautiful funnel system. We don't have that. The collegiate game here in the United States is really good, and I think it's overlooked at times, which is why we focus on the draft. But nobody thinks that the best player in the world is going to come through the NCAA draft in soccer because of the global nature of the sport. So there's different ways of looking at it, and that to me was just an incredible experience, like, and an opportunity that not many sports organizations, let alone soccer clubs in the world, can avail of. The chance to really sit with these people, who all of whom have won a title over the last kind of 3 or 4 years for the Avs, Nuggets, and Rams, and you get to pick their brains, you get to take best practice, and then bring that with you and implement it. So from a strategy perspective, there's no doubt our ownership has built out, you know, this sports group, the largest sports group in the world, to do that, to make sure that we can come together, that we can learn, and that we can utilize the scale and bring best practice right the way across the enterprise. And it's something that, you know, is really exciting. It's hard for us to maybe show that, you know, immediately, but the benefits of that are massive. In terms of Arsenal, you know, the work we've been able to do with them, again, some of that will be behind the scenes. You know, the scouting collaboration, the fact that Fran Taylor came from Arsenal to us, great connections in there, talking about some young players that we see in South America, and being able to go to them and say, hey, if you watch this guy, can we see the scouting report? No problem, here it is. Sending some of our younger players over there to show them what it requires to be at that level. Cole Bassett's gone over, Darren Yappi's gone over, Adam Beaudry's gone over. These are all things that really help and benefit us greatly. Austin Trusty, though, I think is probably the best example. Austin was going to leave in June of 2021. So if you think back to that, we're in a race for the Western Conference title, and the Supporter Shield ultimately that year as well, although obviously New England won it. But we're in that race, and our best defender, as all young defenders should want to do, gets an offer from Europe and says, hey, I really want to explore this. That just took one call from me to Josh. Hey, Josh, I think we've got something here that we could do with Arsenal that could be even bigger for the club. And he's like, okay, great, let's do it. You know, that kind of support is hard to get. I mean, because in Arsenal, we're talking about, let's be quite honest here, we're talking about one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the world. That's what we're talking about. And there is a gap. Like, we can't be ignorant of that fact. Like, there's a big gap right now between where we are and where Arsenal are. How we bridge that gap over time, that's going to take a long time to do that. But the ability for us to utilize the scale and size of our organization, the incredible expertise that's within our group, that is given to us. That is put there for us. And every single person that we reach out to is just so welcoming, so happy to help, and so thoughtful with what they do. Even things like medicals, sending guys for medicals there in London rather than bring them over here, all benefits of the size and scale of the organization.
Really good question, and really good insight there, behind the scenes insight there from Pádraig as well. Any follow-ups to what we were just talking about there? Okay, let's move on to a final. I got a bit of a toughie here. This one comes from Brian, who wants to talk about
Crookham?
Not Crookham, although he's somewhere in the back here. Sorry, you can hear me a little bit better now. So this one addresses the kind of big 2026 that's coming up, with the Denver Summit, of course, coming to play as well. With the Summit starting next season and their ownership already being more present than that of the Rapids, why shouldn't we switch season ticket memberships over to them? That one comes from Brian.
Yeah, I think, first of all, you're dead right. The 2026 is going to be such an epic year here. It's going to be incredible, and we're really excited about it. I think first and foremost, the idea is to have some players there, right? We want to have some of our players participating in the World Cup. We'll have some former players. I think, as I said, Moise Bombito likely to be there with Canada as well. So that's going to be incredibly exciting. Caitlin Kinser's got a lot of plans for the community. I think we've got a new mini pitch that's opening tomorrow, the Visa Street Soccer Park downtown in Skyline Park. We've got watch parties that are going to be held, a lot of programming, a lot of activity to try and grow the game here. And then, as you said, we've got the Summit starting as well, which is, as the dad of a young girl, like, super exciting. Really looking forward to bringing her to her first game there. Look, I think it's a really interesting topic right now, and I think it's, you know, for everybody to make their own mind on what's possible for them. And I'm very, very well aware of that, you know, disposable income, people have got to decide what they want to do with it. I do think there's a place for both, though, where possible, and where people can do that. I think there's an incredible opportunity to support the growth of soccer in this state. And it's great for us, great for Colorado, that we're going to have both professional women's and men's soccer playing at the very highest level of the game. And I'm super excited to go out and watch them play, but I also know what we're producing as well, the type of talent that we're producing, the type of players that we have here. So I'm hoping and fully believing that this state, which is a soccer state, let's be honest, is going to get behind both teams and really follow both teams, hopefully to a lot of success over the coming years. So really excited to have them in town. I'm excited to see what they do, but I'm excited for where we're going as well. We have a lot of big things cooking and a lot of competitive soccer still to be played as well.
Interesting question there. Any follow-ups to what Pádraig just spoke about Denver Summit coming into play and the kind of give and take there? Any follow-ups on that? Got a question over here.
This is a soccer state, right? You said it yourself, this is a soccer state. But the past few years, we've seen fans kind of protest this club and leave. And what are we doing to bring back the fans and say, this is a club that wants to compete with the rest of MLS? And not only that, spend on the same level as the rest of MLS, because you said yourself, this is a soccer state, but people are going to have that decision there on whether they want to come back to the Rapids and also support the women's team, or only support the women's team yourself.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. First of all, I want to say I love the jersey. All right, that's a pretty cool jersey.
Sweet one
right there. I think you've hit the nail on the head, and I think it's a really interesting point that you raised, because you distinguish between winning and spending, and I think that's often something that can be confused here. I look around our league, and I'll be really honest, I see a lot of spend that doesn't equal winning. That's something that is unfortunately all too common. And in my past role at UEFA, one of the things that we did was we looked at that correlation, and the correlation between spend and winning in Europe is incredibly high, above 0.7. The correlation between spend and winning in MLS is incredibly low. And it means that there's a lot of poor spending, ultimately, and spending that doesn't go anywhere. I think I mentioned earlier, over the last 5 years, we've had 3 appearances in the playoffs, 2 Champions League appearances, and we finished top of the Western Conference. There's only 6 other teams in the entire league that have 3 playoff appearances and 2 Champions League appearances. So that level of success is there. What I will acknowledge, and what I acknowledged earlier, we haven't won in the playoffs. And that's a big deal. We haven't won that game of consequence. We haven't gone out there. We didn't beat Portland. We dominated Portland. We should have beat Portland, but we didn't. And we haven't put a trophy in the cabinet outside the Rocky Mountain Cup. And we're obviously planning to bring that back now in October. But yeah, it's a pretty big deal. So I think the thing that I focus on is winning. That's what matters to me. And I think it's really important that we think and talk about how we go about doing that, right? Like, as I said, in 21, coming off that, we believed in Jack Price. We believed in Diego Rubio. We believed in the guys that had that success. And we felt it was only right to give them another chance. And then the injuries hit. And all of a sudden, Pricey barely plays again. 14 or 15 games over the next 2 years. And it's really difficult in this league. When you lose your best players, competing is almost impossible. And it's one of the reasons why we'll move to a 4-2 or a 2-4-2 model rather than the 3 DPs. Because the more you concentrate your resources in fewer number of players, the higher the risk is that you don't qualify. It's no coincidence that in the year that LAFC lost Vela to injury, they didn't qualify for the playoffs either. So there's that element of how you go about building for sustained success, understanding that it is a competitive environment. There's a lot of other teams looking to do it as well. But you've got to be able to position yourself in a way that allows you to do something that they don't. And that can't just be, oh, we're just going to go and buy this player, that player, the other player. There's got to be a thoughtfulness to it. There's got to be a strategy to it. We believe in what we call a useful roster, right? Like pretty much 90% of your minutes is going to come from 16 or 17 players. That's been proven over an extended period of time. How do you make sure that you've got real depth in that you've got good balance between experience and youthfulness, that you've got players who ultimately fit the game model of the coach, fit the philosophy of the club, and they can go out there and compete? Then how do you make sure that you've got a lot of good, young, talented, hungry players coming through underneath that are pushing these guys and that are ready to take over when hopefully the guys that have excelled maybe make that next move for them? So it's a great question, and it's a really nuanced question. And I think what you're going to find from us is a complete and utter commitment to winning. And that's ultimately what was there. When we went to our ownership group and to Kevin and said, look, we think Paxton Aronson's the right guy here, but it's going to require a financial package that's above and beyond what we currently have in our budget, they backed that. So the backing is there. It's got to be the right thing. It's got to be the right player. And I'll be really honest with you. Like, I'm not someone personally, coming from my background in UEFA, what I've done throughout my career, I don't believe in just going after big flashy signings for the sake of it. I really don't. I believe in a calculated, methodical approach that's going to provide dividends over time. That's what I think is important. We can be challenged in that when we don't win. That's completely fair, completely fair. But I think what we've got to do and what we've got to continue to do is to showcase that we can be successful with this strategy that we're employing. Because, excuse me, because as I said, there's just far too many cases in this league of teams spending massive sums of money and not having any success. So we want to drive towards that. Success is the main thing. We want to make sure it's 4 and 6, right? Not just 3 and 5, but 4 and 6. And how do we keep pushing on?
So, winning over Flash essentially seems to be the theme there. Any follow-up questions to that? Also, I'm just going to open things up to any final questions from our group here, and please raise your hand if you do have a question.
All right, thanks, Chris. Thanks, Morgan. So, I'm grateful for what you're saying. I see the difference on the pitch. I see the level of investment in the club. Year over year, I've been doing this now for season ticket on for 15 years. I've seen the level of investment. I've seen the level of commitment. It's there. When you came on, you talked about the Rapids way and the Denver Post. And if you've been around the club, you know what that is. So now how do we go from just being a perennial playoff team, which, let's be honest, to be in the playoffs, you have to be around 40, 45 points, which is mediocre, to top 4, which is now you're seriously competing for MLS Cup. What does it take for us to go from 6, 7, 8 seed, 9 seed to top 4 and winning MLS Cup? Thanks.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Eric. And I think it's the thing we talk about the most now. It's good to great, right? That's the next step, and how do you take that next step? And again, I think it's by being systematic in your approach. You know, there's teams out there that have done that, and there's teams then that have jumped up and down a little bit too much. And I would say that's where we have, right? We've got a top place finish, and we've got a bottom place finish. That's what we want to avoid. We don't want that. We're pretty clear. 40 points, I don't think will quite get you the playoffs anymore. I think you need to be closer to that 45 mark. And I think that's just going to become more and more competitive in the coming years. And I think, look, there is parity. There's parity of outcome in MLS rather than parity of spend at times. And that means it's an incredibly competitive environment that you're trying to kind of compete within. The trick for us, and I don't know if I fully agree that it's being in the top 4 is the guarantee of MLS Cup. The playoffs have a little bit of variability to them, I would say. That's one of the beauties about the American system. I remember Kevin Doyle and I talking about this back in the day when we had the chance to finish top of the Supporter Shield in 2016. I'm sure you remember 2 games to go, Portland and Houston. We win both, we win. And unfortunately, we should have got a penalty. Caleb Calvert was fouled in the first few minutes in Portland, but people don't remember that. You do. All right, good. You know, teams are built for the regular season. That's what they're built for. You know, I talk to John Tharrington about this all the time. It's very difficult for us to build for a team to win in the playoffs. You want to build the best team you can build to compete over a 34-game season over an extended period of time. And then you're hoping you don't have any injuries going into playoffs, you know, and that you get a little bit of good luck that's needed in that moment. The key thing for us now, because I love the part that you're talking about getting into that top 4, because that's what I focus on, even more than anything else. Because that means ultimately you're producing a really top team that's competitive in every single game it's playing across the course of the season, and ultimately winning more often than not in those games. And I think we've got to raise the bar while raising the depth, or increasing the depth in the team. I think right now we're not in a position where we can withstand a couple of injuries. They're maybe impacting us more than we would like, and there's not the consistency that's there. Some of that I'll hold my hands up. The inconsistency part, we have deliberately built a young team, and I will hold my hands up and say that is coming from me. I want us to be a young, hungry team. Part of that is because the game model that we play requires a level of energy and physical output that, believe you me, now I'm 46 and my knees are rocking, I know it takes a toll over the years. So you do need young players. But young players invariably are going to have their ups and downs. And they're going to have that, you know, small pieces of inconsistency over the course of the year. And I think what we've got to do now is get that spine of the team right so that the young pieces can be around that, and that we can still manage the ups and downs of the season and get results. You guys, look, everyone here has been doing this a long time and you know, are deeply knowledgeable about the sport of soccer. And we all know the adage of winning when you're not at your best and how important that is. And I think right now that's the next step that we have to take. How do we win those games when we're missing 2 starters? How do we win those games when a couple of guys aren't quite at it on that night, or when the team isn't quite performing? That is going to require a continued evolution of our game model. It's going to require a couple more players that are at a better level that we need to bring in to ultimately raise the bar right the way around. But I think more than anything, it is going to require standards. It is going to require just an unrelenting pursuit of what we're trying to do, and being unforgiving in those standards, and being incredibly demanding. And I think that's something that we can actually become better at, to be perfectly honest with you. So there's no secret formula to it. If there was, everybody would do it, right? Like, that's the nature of the beast. And you see some teams that did incredibly well last year outside the playoffs now. And as I said, there is a lot of parity in the league. But I think it comes from everything. It comes from us raising the standards, holding people accountable, being demanding of each other all the time. It comes from continuing to refine and hone that game model, and then it comes from adding a few more pieces to this group to ultimately get us to where we need to be.
Got another question over here.
I just can't say no to a microphone. What can I say? So, Pádraig, if I'm doing the math right, this is year 11 at the club, 2015?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's been a minute, right? I don't know if you know this or not. You've taken a little heat over the years. It's a bit of an unforgiving job. I don't know if anybody told you, but that being said, like, 11 years is a long time for anybody with any club. What's your best day in those 11 years?
Oh, wow.
No pressure. Nope. I mean,
yeah. I'll be honest with you. I don't know if I could boil it down to a single day. Like, I really don't. Like, I think I'm going to give you a couple. Like, I'll never forget running along the. Everyone knows we've got that little area outside the third tier, or outside the media area. That's where I was watching the game from back in 16 when Tim saved the penalties. I will never forget running along that and just hugging staff members and CK and Alex and, you know, those that were there and still here from that time. That moment was truly incredible. I will never forget running out onto the field in 21, you know, having beaten LAFC 5-2 and clinched the Western Conference. That was an incredible moment. But there's other moments that I don't think will necessarily resonate as much with supporters. Like, we'll do things that are all staffs, or I remember watching our staff trying to make paper airplanes and throw them across the concourse, like on one of Jordan Rothrock's One Club challenges. And those are moments that, for me, like, at the end of the day, the only way you stay somewhere for 11 years is if you really love working with the people that you work with. There's no other reason to stay anywhere for that long. And I'm incredibly privileged and really honored to work with the people that I work with. And there's not a day goes by where I don't get to come into work and enjoy what we do together. And it reminds me of something that when I was at the event that I spoke to you about, Les Snead, who's the GM of the Rams, said something really interesting. He said, we're trying to do really hard things together. And it was a really interesting way of saying it, because ultimately there's 30 teams in MLS. Only one of them is going to win MLS Cup. That's it. Just one. If your only barometer for success is winning MLS Cup, that's really hard for 29 people every year. Really, really hard. And one of the things that keeps me as positive as I am about this is the people that we have. And that people extends out into our supporters, like, as well, because I look out over that field, like, when we score a goal, it's the greatest feeling in the world. You just look out and you see this just crescendo of people rise up. And it's amazing. Like, and I'm so fortunate that because I've been here for so long, I've got to meet so many of you and know so many of you by name. And I don't mind when we take heat. Like, I really don't. It's part and parcel of it. If you weren't as passionate about it, you wouldn't care. You wouldn't decide to write what you write. And I'm very well aware that, like, that's what you want in fans. You want that. And to be honest with you, Dave, you want a little bit of irrationality at times too, right? Because you don't get to see behind the curtains. You don't necessarily know what's going on all the time. But we want that. Like, we thrive on that. And ultimately, it's what keeps everybody going. And so for me, I just feel so privileged to have been in this role for so long. I feel so privileged to have been with this club. I was obsessed with soccer from the youngest age, never knowing where it would take me. But Colorado's home. This club is everything to me. And, you know, I think going out there, bringing my daughter there was a pretty special moment as well. But it's always going to be the people. It's always going to be the people, the players, our staff, our supporters. That's what it comes down to. That's what makes this all so special.
Sorry, I'm not trying to hog this. Apparently I'm getting online questions to ask to you. I'm going to change this one up a little bit. This one's coming from my old hometown, St. Louis, from John Borez. I think he just asked a question so I can drop his name. But we love you, John. Don't crash any planes out there. I'm going to change the question a little bit, though. Josh and Stan walk in, give you a blank check. You can't spend it on a player. As far as the stadium grounds go, inside, outside the stadium, what's the one thing that you would want to write that check for first?
See, this is the perfect thing for me right now, because ultimately I wouldn't make that decision. That's why we want to go out to the fans, right? We want to go out to the fans, and we want to figure out exactly what it is that we need to do to make sure that this is a best-in-class fan experience, and that we ultimately build this club to do what it's meant to do, which is to be this incredible community asset that is successful both on and off the field. And that's it. And this club and those decisions should not be made by any one person. Like, you know, someone else will be sitting in this seat in the future. It shouldn't be them either. This is about the supporters. It's about making sure that we represent our community in a way that resonates far beyond 90 minutes on the field, right? This has got to be something that's deeper than that and much more connected than that. So again, that's the big one that Haley's tackling at the moment, and that I know we're going to get right, because I know the work that she's putting in to making sure we get this right.
I just want to point out the fact that Pádraig just said that 2 questions ago, that he thrives off irrationality and your feedback, and you have an open mic still. So any final questions on that one, please raise your hand if you do have one. Bring the cup home?
That's the plan.
That's the plan. Well, I think we'll wrap it up here with that. Pádraig, I think everybody, this is a really cool event for fans to be able to ask you direct questions, and I suppose, be able to, again, talk through some of the pretty biting questions that we had here about the direction of the club. So I think, Pádraig, you're deserving of a round of applause here from everybody here for taking the time.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. The thing I want to say from the bottom of my heart, and I know I'm speaking on behalf of our entire staff and our ownership group, like, we are so grateful for the support that you bring every single game, every single day. It means the world to us. And showing up at something like this tonight means a lot to us too. Like, we know the passion that's there, and I just want to make sure that you all know that is echoed inside the 4 walls of our building. Like, you've got a group of incredible people here who are working very, very hard to make sure that we get this right, and that we get you what we all want and what you all deserve, which is an MLS Cup back here in Colorado. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you all. And just a reminder as well that this is not the last of the fan forums, that this offseason there'll be one with Haley Dermer, who we just mentioned, CBO, and Kevin Demoff as well, the KSC president of Team and Media Operations. So those will be coming up as well. But in the meantime, thanks for joining us on the live stream and for being here, of course, in person as well. Thank you.